Bienvenidos a una nueva actividad de la Academia Dominicana de la Historia. Antes que todo, permítanme saludar a los académicos de número, correspondientes, colaboradores y los sospechosos usuales que nos acompañan todos los miércoles aquí en la Academia. Nuestra institución nos convoca hoy a la Conferencia Diplomático de Consecuencia, Ebenezer Bassett, primer diplomático afroestadounidense, que estará a cargo del licenciado Christopher Teal, diplomático de carrera en el Departamento de Estado de los Estados Unidos de América, quien nos acompaña como una cortesía de la Embajada de los Estados Unidos en nuestro país a través de su Departamento de Asuntos Públicos. El profesor Teal es un diplomático de carrera del Departamento de Estado que sirvió recientemente como cónsul general en el Consulado de los Estados Unidos en Nogales, México, y que estuvo también en el Departamento Consular en Santo Domingo aquí en el año 1999. O sea que está bastante aplatanado ya en República Dominicana. Él está actualmente en un año sabático con una beca de la Escuela de Periodismo y Comunicación Masiva Walter Cronkite de la Universidad Estatal de Arizona y está desarrollando un documental sobre el primer diplomático afroamericano, Ebenezer Bassett, donde cuenta la historia de este innovador diplomático y examina el legado de la diversidad racial actual casi 50 años después de su nombramiento en Haití y la República Dominicana. Antes de unirse al servicio exterior, el señor Teal trabajó como un galardonado periodista Juan Williams en la obra biográfica de Thurgood Marshall, revolucionario americano, sobre el ex magistrado de la Corte Suprema de los Estados Unidos, y que fue publicado por Times Book y Random House en octubre de 1998. El New York Times colocó esta obra entre sus obras de no ficción más destacadas de ese año. La biografía de Teal sobre Bassett, titulada Héroe de la Española, se publicó en el 2008. Teal tiene una licenciatura de la Universidad de Arkansas y una maestría en Ciencias Políticas de la Universidad George Washington. Con su conferencia Diplomático de Consecuencia, Ebenezer Bassett, primer diplomático afroestadounidense, recibamos al licenciado Christopher Teal, diplomático del Departamento de Estado de los Estados Unidos de América.
Hay que quitar la silla de ahí. La silla hay que quitarla de ahí.
¿Qué tal? Muy buenas noches. Es un placer para mí estar aquí con ustedes, estar de nuevo en Santo Domingo. Como hizo referencia a mi estancia aquí, yo llegué como diplomático trabajando en la embajada aquí en Santo Domingo en mi primer puesto como diplomático en el año 1999. Tuve 3 años aquí trabajando muy a gusto. Tengo muchos recuerdos, muy buenos recuerdos de mi estancia aquí en Santo Domingo, y salí en el año 2002. Y esta semana fue la primera vez que he tenido la oportunidad de regresar a Santo Domingo, y realmente para mí es un honor otra vez estar aquí. Ha sido un gran placer visitar algunos lugares. Yo viví no tan lejos en Gascue cuando estaba aquí trabajando, y visitar lugares aquí en la zona colonial anteriormente esta semana, comiendo mangú y pollo provocón y todos esos buenos recuerdos, la buena comida, la convivencia de mi tiempo aquí. Realmente es un placer. Como mencionó, ya publiqué el libro de Héroe de Española, Hero Española. Lamentablemente no he hecho una versión en español todavía, pero hablando de obras en el futuro que quiero hacer, es sacar una versión en español del libro. Pero descubrí, no sé si descubrí, pero para mí fue descubrimiento de la historia de ese hombre, Ebenezer Bassett. No sé si hay mucho conocimiento de ese señor, de un grupo destacados de historiadores aquí. Había muy poco conocimiento del señor Bassett. Y yo descubrí su historia en mi primer tiempo aquí en Santo Domingo. Yo me acuerdo, llegué hacia el finales del año 99, fui a la embajada para presentarme con nuestra encargada de negocios. No tuvimos nuestro embajador Chuck Manat, quien vino más tarde todavía, pero fui a presentarme con ella y me acuerdo caminando por el pasillo hacia su oficina y vi fotos de los ex embajadores destacados de los Estados Unidos. Y en ese tiempo, al principio de relación, obviamente tuvimos, no fueron nombrados embajadores, sino usaban el título ministro residente. Era algo peculiar de ese tiempo en nuestro país, pero fueron los diplomáticos que fueron nombrados por la Casa Blanca, y en ese tiempo fueron nombrados, acreditados a ambos lados de la isla. En el caso de los primeros, fueron residentes solamente en Puerto Príncipe, pero fueron acreditados a ambos países y cubrieron asuntos de ambos lados de la isla. Y noté dos cosas que me acuerdo muy bien, caminando, viendo los ex embajadores. Noté la cara, el retrato de Frederick Douglass. Y estaba muy emocionado porque entre miles de cosas que Frederick Douglass hizo en su vida, ni me di cuenta que también era diplomático. Entonces, para mí, descubrir eso me emocionó mucho y pensé, qué interesante todo lo que hizo también fue diplomático. Y noté unos hombres también antes de él. Había varios hombres de raza afroamericana y pensé, qué curioso. Viendo la primera cara de un afroamericano fue en el año 1869. Un señor que se llama Ebenezer Bassett. Nunca había oído ese nombre antes en mi vida. No sabía nada de él. Y me sorprendió justo después de nuestra guerra civil, con un conflicto, con una base racial, un problema de esclavitud y todo ese tiempo, y el tiempo de reconstrucción en nuestro país, en esa parte del siglo XIX, que mandábamos un afroamericano como representante de nuestro gobierno a otro país. Me sorprendió. Bueno, intenté hacer un poco de investigación aquí. Lamentablemente no pude encontrar mucha información, por cierto. Después terminé mi estancia aquí, fui a trabajar en nuestra embajada en Perú. Pero siempre me quedé con esta inquietud. ¿Quién era ese hombre? ¿Qué hacía él? Y descubrí que él fue el primer diplomático afroamericano. Pero todavía no pude encontrar mucha información de él. Bueno, regresé a Washington a trabajar en el Departamento de Estado y entonces yo decidí ir a hacer un poco más de investigación. Entonces fui a la Biblioteca del Congreso, los archivos nacionales. Alguna gente tiene hobbies normales, pues yo no. Voy a las bibliotecas y archivos. Y empecé a hacer investigación en ese señor. Y lo que descubrí fue una historia increíble. Y tuve ganas de conocer más y más y más. Y empecé a hacer más investigación sobre la genealogía de él. Y me contacté con historiadores en el estado de Connecticut, porque era su estado natal. En Nueva Inglaterra, en Estados Unidos. Y también encontré una historia de una familia increíble, realmente líderes en términos de nuestra historia. Su bisabuelo llegó a los Estados Unidos en el siglo XVIII como esclavo. Su abuelo ganó su libertad por pelear en la revolución en los Estados Unidos contra Inglaterra. Y él, señor Bassett, fue el primer afroamericano de graduarse de una universidad en el estado de Connecticut. Entonces, líder, y hasta llegar a ser el primer afroamericano como diplomático. Y todo fue muy interesante, pero lo que me llamó más la atención fue su estancia entre 1869 hasta 1877. Estuvo 8 años como nuestro ministro residente, y todos los conflictos que había en ese tiempo, era un tiempo muy complicado, me di cuenta, para muchos países, no solo Estados Unidos con nuestra guerra civil, sino conflictos, golpes de estados en Haití, conflictos aquí en este lado de la isla también, conflictos entre Haití y la República Dominicana, conflictos con países de Europa, un tiempo con mucho conflicto mundial. Y ver a este señor como diplomático, como embajador en ese tiempo, y también un ser humano que se dio cuenta de esa problemática de la guerra, y era una de las primeras voces realmente para llamar la atención a esta cuestión que ahora llamamos derechos humanos. Pero él era uno de los primeros en los Estados Unidos, por lo menos, hablando de la necesidad de poner atención en derechos humanos en nuestra política exterior. A veces no siempre fue visto muy bien en Washington con los políticos. A veces fue muy difícil luchar por derechos humanos en su trabajo, pero fue una historia increíble, un líder sin lugar de duda. Entonces, mi meta realmente era rescatar un poco de su historia, contar su historia al público, y después pasé algunos años escribiendo ese libro y para hacer ese libro más al público. Bueno, publiqué el libro, cada año hago algunas conferencias, practico con estudiantes sobre todo porque hay poco conocimiento con los jóvenes en la historia, pero siempre me quedé con esta inquietud de hacer un poco más. Bueno, como ya mencionó, estuve trabajando también en México, terminé mi estancia como cónsul general y tuve la oportunidad de aplicar para una beca y tomar un año sabático. Entonces lo hice y estoy actualmente trabajando, gracias al apoyo de esa beca, con la Universidad Estatal de Arizona y haciendo un documental. Realmente la idea es también pasar más información al público un poco más amplio y trabajar en otro medio también, porque he hecho libros, es muy interesante, pero estoy aprendiendo también un nuevo proceso de contar una historia y alcanzar un público un poco más amplio. Entonces todo este año estoy trabajando en grabar entrevistas. Fui a Washington a hacer algunas entrevistas con algunos embajadores de Estados Unidos, fui a Connecticut a grabar algunas entrevistas con familiares y historiadores ahí en Connecticut. Y estoy aquí esta semana también porque quería incluir más información sobre perspectivas, tanto en el lado dominicano como en el lado haitiano. He grabado algunas cosas aquí en Santo Domingo. Más tarde esta semana voy a Puerto Príncipe para también grabar algunas entrevistas con la idea de contar en lo que se pueda en un documental varias perspectivas de esa época del siglo XIX. Entonces ya estoy todavía, esta versión me gustaría mostrar un poco de la versión de donde estamos en ese proceso. Es algo que se llama un rough cut, es un borrador que todavía estoy trabajando en varias partes. Hay que afinar, no estoy listo para Netflix todavía, hay que afinar algunas cositas, pero voy a añadir unas entrevistas que estoy grabando aquí en la isla esta semana, y con la ayuda de mis colegas de Arizona State y mi asistente Beli está aquí grabando y apoyando con cuestiones técnicas. La idea es tener este verano, más o menos, voy a terminar mi rough cut, mi borrador, y el año que viene voy a poder lanzar por fin una película final, porque el año 2019 sería el aniversario de 150 años desde su nombramiento. Y viendo 150 años más tarde, no solamente es poder contar esta historia, que sí es sumamente importante, sino también hablar de esos temas de derechos humanos, de migrantes, de guerras, de algunas cuestiones que él tuvo que confrontar hace siglo y medio, pero hoy en día siguen siendo muy vigentes, siguen siendo muy importantes. Y nosotros como diplomáticos tenemos que tratar con estos temas en varias partes del mundo, es parte del pan de cada día para muchos de nosotros y para los políticos que tienen que decidir. Pero hay que entender la historia y de dónde venimos para entender dónde estamos ahora y a dónde vamos en el futuro. Y además espero desarrollar material educacional para también profesores y pueden usar con estudiantes, porque al final de cuentas es muy bueno para nosotros entender más del pasado y entendernos mejor ahora, pero ustedes todos enseñan también y hay una nueva generación que viene, que tienen que aprender. Tuve el gran gusto ayer ir a Pucamaima para una plática con estudiantes. Y tuve un grupo más o menos así, con 50 estudiantes, y les pregunté, ¿quiénes de ustedes conocen de Frederick Douglass? Un estudiante levantó la mano, me sorprendió. Yo creo que es más o menos igual en Estados Unidos. Si voy con estudiantes en Estados Unidos y pregunto, ¿quién sabe de Frederick Douglass? Algunos estudiantes van a levantar la mano, pero no muchos. Es una pena, es un problema, pero se puede resolver. Lo bueno es que se puede resolver con más información, más educación y alcanzar. Justo estuvimos platicando de Twitter y Facebook y todo el social media un poco antes. La academia tiene una página de Facebook, tiene página de Twitter y todo eso, y ya estoy siguiendo Twitter que tienen ustedes. Pero es muy importante usar esas herramientas también para alcanzar, sobre todo jóvenes, sobre todo audiencias más masivas. Y espero poder también usar social media, usar un medio visual que es un documental, y además crear material que al final de cuentas profesores, historiadores como ustedes pueden usar. Pero también me interesa mucho escuchar sus perspectivas, y parte de lo que quiero hacer es entender un poco más perspectivas dominicanas, tanto perspectivas de Haití, en mi estancia aquí, y para pues hacer más completo el documental. Entonces, esta sí es la meta, y quiero agradecer a mis colegas de la embajada por invitarme y apoyar mi estancia aquí. Y quizás con eso pensamos que el sonido y todo está listo. Me gustaría pasar una parte del borrador que tenemos de la película, y podemos ver, y no sé qué tengo que hacer. ¿Hago sign in o qué hago?
Un clic.
Así nomás.
Okay.
Ya abre.
Ya, aquí.
Y eso
Ahí.
es. Parece. Y no sé si sería posible bajar un poco la luz. Para mostrar. ¿Es posible bajar un poco la luz?
Allá.
Que se ve mejor. No tengo popcorn, no tengo. Perfecto. Muy bien, ok. Y con eso voy a dejar con la película, y después espero hay tiempo para contestar preguntas y escuchar comentarios. Acuérdense, es un borrador. Sean muy amables, por favor. Muy bien.
Bassett suffered in history because he stood up and he thought that humanity was more important than playing politics.
He did what was right at the time that was required, regardless of the circumstances, and he was willing to pay the consequences for it.
Bassett really showed us that being courageous is the right thing to do.
I think he stepped into every one of those things because he truly believed he could make a difference.
During a time of unrest, he was able to save so many lives.
He embodied this honest integrity. He paid a cost, and the cost was a cost to his legacy.
Bassett was definitely a leader because he was all about doing the right thing, even in the face of not being backed by the State Department.
Do you know who this man is? Do you know how significant he is?
Ebenezer Bassett was a man of consequence. As the first African-American diplomat, Bassett had a remarkable journey. That journey starts with a remarkable family.
Genealogically, Ebenezer's great-grandfather, Pero, surely endured the Middle Passage, you know, the greatest forced migration in world history. Somehow he came to the Naugatuck Valley, which was then known as all of Derby. Derby was a large geographical area at that time. Now it's a small city in Connecticut. Slavery is not something contained to the antebellum South. Slavery is a worldwide institution at the time. It existed north and south.
Pero and his wife Hagar had at least 2 children, also born into slavery in colonial Connecticut. But the New England colonies were bursting with revolution, and African-American slaves soon joined that rebellion to gain their freedom.
A lot of towns in Connecticut they were like local ordinances, for lack of a better term, that when they were forced to raise troops for the Continental Army, they were looking at bodies, similar to the Civil War when every town had a quota to raise. And it was expedient for some owners to allow their slaves to enlist.
Ebenezer Bassett's grandfather Tobiah did indeed enlist, and in the process won his freedom in his newly independent country. He and his wife Rachel would have children that would also become leaders in Connecticut, including Evan Tobias.
And again, the significance of his father and his grandfather is they were black governors. And I think a lot of people look at what that meant, and people kind of celebrate what that is. But if you really understood the context, you know, the context is really about control. It was about white leadership of the times controlling the black community and having some insight into the black community. So you allow them this structure. But to me, I think that they use the position as a way of creating opportunity, you know? And so it wasn't a figurehead. I think that they really bought into the positions. And I think for the young Bassett and others to look up that this wasn't just a pageantry thing, but this was true leadership.
Though a leader in the community, Evan Tobias tended a family plot that likely belonged to the white Bassett family in Derby. Evan Tobias married Susan Gregory in the early 1830s, and they have 3 children, including Ebenezer D. Bassett in 1833.
His parents move up to Litchfield for a few years for economic opportunity. They move for the jobs. They move where the work is. They ultimately returned back to Derby pretty quickly. They were definitely tenant farmers. He's listed in the 1850 census at 16 years old, along with his 2 siblings and his 2 parents, so there's 3 kids in the family. And he's listed there at 16 years old as a tenant farmer, so we know he was farming alongside his father.
Young Ebenezer was a bright child, and his parents saw great potential in their son, as did others, including the town doctor, Ambrose Beardsley.
He wanted a job. Maybe he didn't want to stay on the farm, so he went to work for the local doctor, and he probably had to walk up Derby Neck Road up to downtown, and work in the doctor's office. You know, we know he tended the doctor's horse, and he was a smart kid. And one of the interesting facts was that he did attend public school in the Naugatuck Valley in Derby.
Part of the integration of Derby, which kind of separated itself from other Connecticut towns and other towns throughout the United States, is everyone was afforded an education, whether black, white, whatever. Everybody was afforded an education. Because if you think about the times that he was born in, that it would have been more profitable for his family to have Bassett be a laborer than to sit in a classroom. You know, that's money. He could have been out there laboring, bringing that money back. So what was that sacrifice to them? To say that education, you being able to be an educated man, is more important than the well-being or the financial contributions that your labor could provide for us.
In fact, his brilliance was too great to simply allow Bassett to remain in Derby. With his academic success, members of the community helped Bassett attend a college prep school, the Wilbraham Monson Academy in Massachusetts. His academic success there would have placed him on track for university education, except for one factor. Ebenezer was black, and no college in the area had yet integrated. That would soon change.
He probably did decide to become a teacher, and the place to do it was Connecticut State Normal School, which was in its infancy.
And New Britain was a split community, but it had a very large population of its citizens that were abolitionists, that believed in the freedom and equality. Bassett emerged at the right time for this community. You know, New Britain's history to the Underground Railroad, all those structures were here.
And this young black man is going to be in the first graduating class, and he is going to not only be in that class, but he is going to give the address.
With a degree in hand, Bassett set off to make a difference and accepted a challenging job to teach in New Haven.
We taught at the Whiting School in New Haven. We taught 30 or 40 unruly kids, straightened them out and made them good students. It showed him the character he had.
But New Haven becomes the cradle of his adult life. He meets and marries Eliza Park. New Haven in the 1850s, again, is the crossroads for every reform movement. Everybody comes to New Haven. What are the issues? Civil rights, education for black children, female education.
Most importantly in New Haven, Bassett befriended the man that would change his life, Frederick Douglass.
So their relationship really begins in what we name as sort of this abolitionist tradition. And what's fascinating is they really meet when Douglass actually is a speaker. And what we find is, as Bassett is a prominent local school teacher in and around Connecticut, he had to go see this great orator, Frederick Douglass. I think that really moved something in Bassett, and then that's when we really see that cross-connection really beginning of their relationship, and it just blossoms from there.
If you're meeting Frederick Douglass, who's always talking about a better nation for blacks and abolitionism and the evils of human bondage, it's kind of hard to believe Bassett's not going to be highly influenced by this. He's not going to take up the cause.
With his deep, booming voice and fierce, imposing presence, the abolitionist made a forceful and unrepentant advocate for full equality for blacks. And no doubt, Douglass pushed for something else in his young protege. It was not enough to be black and educated. He challenged Bassett to give something back to his community. Taking that challenge and building upon his love of learning, Bassett left Connecticut to become a teacher and principal at the Institute of Colored Youth in Philadelphia in 1855. It was there that Bassett really came into his own as a voice for human rights.
Philadelphia, obviously, even though it is very close to the Mason-Dixon line, it is a city where escaped blacks go to. They don't usually stay there. They need to go on farther north. I know Bassett was very familiar with the Underground Railroad. I'm certain that he was influenced by what his grandparents probably endured and what he would see close up in Philadelphia. But Philadelphia was also highly influenced and continues to be, I think, sometimes to this day, by Quakers. But I think, if anything, Philadelphia made him more aware, more active, more committed to a lot of these civil rights causes.
And then he goes in there and he's highly successful. And I think he's highly successful because he believes in the potential, you know? So he can get beyond the rhetoric, and he's going to be an ultimate teacher, and that's how I kind of look at it. He's the ultimate educator.
Under Bassett's leadership, the ICY became known for its academic excellence. Going beyond a strong classical education, Bassett pushed his students with a greater political awareness. He invited politicians and abolitionist leaders such as Douglas to give lectures whenever they were in town. Things radically changed with Abraham Lincoln's election and the collapse of the Union in 1860. Nonetheless, many Northerners were initially reluctant to be drawn into the battle.
When Civil War breaks out, and it is a matter of war for the Union, but more importantly, I think there are a lot of people that understand right from the beginning that it's going to be much more than just war for the Union. It is going to be a war of emancipation and freedom. The Emancipation Proclamation is going to be issued after the Battle of Antietam in 1862 informally. Lincoln would issue it formally on January 1st, 1863, and once he did so, there became provisions, political provisions and legal provisions for the recruitment of black men into the Union Army.
In fact, for many in the North, the war remained remote until the summer of 1863. Though the Battle of Gettysburg would end in a Union victory, the threat became existential for the North, and support for arming militias of any able-bodied men grew. The time had come for Bassett and Black Philadelphia to engage in the fight as well. Just days after the bloody battle of Gettysburg, Bassett helped convene a massive crowd to downtown Philadelphia in an effort to recruit black soldiers. He had the honor of being the second speaker of the night, presenting the resolution and making a rousing speech immediately before Frederick Douglass.
And Bassett would pretty much riff off the sort of call the men the color of arms in terms of sort of that battle cry, this idea of African American men sort of using the institution such as the military to bring down the walls of slavery and see that, you know, they're basically taking an active role of actually having African American men participate, be they free or, you know, enslaved.
Men of color to arms, now or never. This is our golden moment. The government of the United States calls for every able-bodied colored man to enter the Army for the 3-year service and join in fighting the battles of liberty and the Union. A new era is open to us. Now, therefore, is our most precious moment. Let us rush to arms. Fail now, and our race is doomed on the soil of our birth.
The mood in that actual meeting place or hall that night, I sort of equated to when the release of the Emancipation, when individuals got word of the Emancipation Proclamation. I think there was tremendous joy, glee, and I think a sense of purpose.
And when I look down at that poster, and I look at the names of the prominent men who advocate this recruitment and do so much to get black men to sign up for the Union cause, I'm always fascinated that Ebenezer Bassett's name is the very first name listed on that poster. And ultimately, they will become a fine combat troops for the Army. But by 1864, black regiments are starting to turn the tide. And there's no doubt that the, 170,000 black men who ultimately fight for the Union turn the cause and make a great contribution to this war for emancipation, freedom for them and their families in many cases, and the Union.
After the Civil War, the country needed rebuilding, and politically, both free blacks and former slaves were anxious to be part of that process.
I mean, it was just a transformative period, as you know, a lot of historians would deem it as an unfinished revolution. There was so much promise there, and you know, with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, when you know African Americans were basically seeing themselves for the first time as free men and free women. Douglass, Bassett, those two gentlemen were very vocal in wanting to see African Americans, the newly freed, basically find their way and find themselves in American society.
With the Union victory, Bassett turned to patrons and looked for opportunities in the political sphere. And there was no one better than Frederick Douglass. The civil rights hero agreed that a diplomatic appointment to Haiti for his young protege would be ideal. Bassett wrote to the president directly, saying he had been persuaded by both white and black citizens to seek the Haitian posting. He referred to himself as a representative colored man who possessed an unchallenged character of probity and patriotism.
My appointment or the appointment of some other proper person of my race would be hailed by them, especially by recently enfranchised colored citizens, as a marked recognition of our new condition in the Republic and an auspicious token of our great future.
You know, it's a very prestigious position. I think maybe Douglass would have liked something like that for himself, but Bassett certainly is an excellent choice in that regard.
I think in essence who Bassett was and the actual recommendations coming from one of the quote-unquote leading African Americans at the time, Douglass. I think Douglass's words goes a long way in many ways, but at the same time, even the president at the time pretty much saw that Bassett was ideal for that nomination.
After just a few weeks in office, Grant indeed dropped the bombshell. He would nominate a black man to serve as the chief of mission in Port-au-Prince. I nominate Ebenezer D. Bassett of Pennsylvania to be Minister Resident and Consul General of the United States to the Republic of Haiti. Vice Gideon H. Hollister recalled. U.S. Grant, Washington, April 12, 1869. The White House moved to stop any backlash against the nomination by also appointing several former Confederate leaders to other positions in the government and promoting Bassett through favorable coverage in the media. The Senate quickly moved and voted 48-5 to confirm him.
Let me congratulate you and rejoice with you. Your appointment is a grand achievement for yourself and for our whole people. I have no doubt you see the importance of your position, as you shall acquit yourself in it wisely, or otherwise we shall be affected favorably or unfavorably.
By June of 1869, Bassett was ready to depart. Joined by his family, they boarded the ship to Port-au-Prince on June 5th, before a great crowd who came to the port of Manhattan to meet him. His old friends and fellow teachers from the ICY, and even the first president of Liberia, Joseph Jenkins Roberts, stood to wish him well.
I shall bring no stain upon the glorious flag of our country. Ladies and gentlemen, I may fail in this mission, but I promise you this: an honest heart, a noble endeavor, and true patriotism.
Individuals and the well-wishers that wanted to see Bassett off and wishing him well off to a new foreign land, in essence, they saw themselves and the progress that the nation was sort of propelling itself.
He departs with a lot of fanfare, and there's, it's really a great moment for him and his family, and they get on the boat, and then he gets horribly seasick. And then when they arrive in Port-au-Prince, there's a revolution in progress. And Haiti is starting to really, really feel the dire effects of revolution after revolution, coup after coup. The United States, I believe, does recognize that trade with Haiti is a very valuable resource. And his post is very important for that reason, because he's there to protect the financial interests of the United States on the island. He probably becomes the most powerful American on the island, if not the most powerful man on the island.
Bassett's arrival coincided with the Civil War, known as the Guerre des Cacaos. It had been particularly devastating, even by the standards of previous bloodletting on the island. By the autumn, Haitian President Sylvain Salnave controlled barely a tiny portion of Haiti. After the northern city of Cap-Haitien fell to the rebel leader, Jean-Nicolas de Saint-Chargé, Bassett had a difficult choice to make. As the situation deteriorated, Bassett felt compelled to call for help. Getting a message to Florida, he was able to telegram Washington, where he pleaded with the Secretary of State, Hamilton Fish.
Gettysburg disabled. No ship here. Please send one immediately and keep it constantly here.
The cry for a battleship was one he repeated numerous times throughout the year. But his government in Washington turned a deaf ear to his appeal. Secretary of State Fish instructed Bassett to remain as neutral as possible in hope of avoiding a backlash should the rebels gain control. The unhappy strife going on there partakes of the nature of a civil war, although it is not recognized as such by us, Fish told Bassett.
A diplomat has two charges. Major charge is to execute the foreign policy of the U.S. Second charge is to make sure that the country that we're in understands that the U.S. has the best interest of not only the U.S. but of that country in mind. And so Bassett had the task in all of the instability to really stand as a beacon of light for human rights. And sometimes the department was not as supportive of him as they should have been.
I mean, he really had to learn on his feet in many ways, and that's discussed in the annals, where he's propelled and thrust into this bloody coup and this battle power struggle, and he has to figure out quickly how can he, as a diplomat, sort of smooth things over, or even find his way in a sort of turmoil, topsy-turvy period at that time.
As the fighting worsened, Bassett joined with his fellow diplomats from the British and French embassies and went marching up to the palace to try to negotiate an end of the conflict and asked Salnave to step down. The Haitian president refused. In the end, there was little they could do to hold back the waves of discontentment as rebel troops swarmed through Port-au-Prince. From his residence overlooking the city, Bassett and his family saw the rebel ships in the harbor and overheard their cannons moving as Sargé's forces pounded the city. A few errant rounds even landed near Bassett's property. Civilians rushed for cover, many coming onto Bassett's 15-acre compound. Soon, almost 3,000 terrified women and children refugees filled the grounds of his home. Eliza Bassett and her young children attempted to assist as many as they could, but in the end, they were simply overwhelmed.
What jumps out at me is, again, sacrifice. His ability to sacrifice. And it's not he sacrificed for himself and for his, protecting his own good, but his family was there. That's the thing that blows my mind. It's like, I can understand somebody doing the things that he did, but your family is there. So either his wife was equally insane, and he's sitting there, fussing with, the Secretary of State and everybody else about things, but every day he had to hear his wife. But I get the sense that there was some commitment for her.
His really pioneering the concept of political asylum. And but Bassett is in the immediate proximity of people who can be slaughtered in front of him, and he protects them. He does grant immunity to them. He does resolve things successfully through his diplomatic skills. I think in many regards, he's a remarkable example of diplomatic ability, white or black.
Eventually, the rebels struck the fatal blow, destroying the palace as Salnave fled across the Dominican border, vainly seeking help from his ally, President Buenaventura Baez of Santo Domingo. But he was quickly captured by Dominican rebels allied to Sargé and brought back to Haiti for quick justice, executed in the smoldering ruins of his former palace. Bassett then negotiated with Sargé for the release of the thousands that still sat panic-stricken in his compound. Sargé was reluctant, demanding a list of refugees so that he could determine who might be political enemies. Bassett refused.
You will pardon me for reminding that the holding of women and children as hostages is repugnant to modern civilization and especially to the governments of the United States.
Sauzet finally gave in. With little regard for his personal safety, Bassett personally escorted the refugees into the heart of the capital to return to their homes. Others captured did not fare as well as Bassett's group. Many were quickly killed, having their throats slit because the new government did not want to waste time on trials.
I think it matters because Bassett was a very good example of leadership. And second, it matters for the emphasis that he put on human rights. In terms of human rights, he stood up and he accepted refugees who would have otherwise been killed if he had not accepted them, and that was against the policy of the State Department. But he was on the ground, and he realized that this was something that he had to do, and of course, when it worked out well, everybody in the State Department took credit for that having happened. And sometimes you have to make a decision on the ground.
It was very significant because he had cabled the State Department and he asked to be able to allow Haitians who were starving and in distress onto the consulate grounds of the U.S. consulate. And he made the decision unilaterally that he was going to bring people in and save those lives. And to me and my family, that is one of the most significant contributions that Ebenezer Bassett made in his lifetime.
Bassett dealt with numerous confrontations over his 8-year assignment to Haiti and the Dominican Republic. In 1870, President Grant pushed the United States to annex the Dominican Republic, which caused instability on both sides of the island. Further fighting, coups d'etat, and civil war were far too common during his tenure, but Bassett led with courage during this time of instability. At the end of the Grant administration in 1877, Bassett submitted his resignation, as was the custom. In spite of any lingering resentment that may have existed in Washington because of his defiant stance, it was impossible for the State Department not to recognize Bassett's work. Acting Secretary of State F.W. Seward wrote to Bassett, thanking him for his years of service. I cannot allow this opportunity to pass without expressing to you the appreciation of the Department for the very satisfactory manner in which you have discharged your duties of the mission at Port-au-Prince during your term of office. This commendation of your services is more especially merited because at various times your duties have been of such a delicate nature as to have required the exercise of much tact and discretion. When Bassett returned to the United States, he spent a decade in New York City as Haiti's Consul General. There he continued to bridge the divide between the countries and work toward the betterment of bilateral relations. Bassett, however, continued to hope for another assignment with the State Department. However, Bassett required the political support for the position and returned again to his friend Douglas. Frederick Douglass was now in his twilight, but at 70 years old, he was still the preeminent black voice in the nation. But Douglass also longed to add a diplomatic posting to his stellar resume. In 1889, newly elected President Benjamin Harrison decided not to nominate Bassett. Rather, he chose the man who had campaigned on his behalf and was the most famous black man in the world, Frederick Douglass. Bassett must have been crushed when he saw the headlines, but instead of sulking, he wrote a 5-page congratulatory letter to his friend, one he marked confidential.
The offer of the mission to you is a tribute to your high character and to the unsurpassed eminence which the rare unanimity of the American people assign to you. You will see that I have never wavered in my esteem, my veneration for you. Believe one then that I indulge in no mere flattery now. I know them, their language and their inspirations, just as you know the people of the District of Columbia. I have no fears on the score of your and myself being able to face the music and to hold our own in the diplomatic dance around the Haitian plum when once we are on the scene.
Another thing that Ebenezer Bassett did that I found exceptionally unusual in the diplomatic corps was when he was passed over for the second appointment to Haiti, and the appointment was given to Frederick Douglass. He immediately volunteered to be helpful because he knew Frederick Douglass was older than he, and therefore just the travails of being in a place like Haiti for an elderly man would be harder. He knew the language, and Frederick Douglass did not know the language. And he was familiar with all the players, not to mention the terrain. And so he offered himself up as a backstop, as a number two, in support to Frederick Douglass, who would be the principal. And that is so difficult nowadays in our diplomatic service.
Mr. Bassett's position will be more important than that of private secretary. He will be Minister Douglas's right-hand man while in Haiti and be responsible to the minister for the conduct of the office, round 1 article of their voyage. The most crucial part of their mission was a highly secretive negotiation from Washington. They were to launch the initial discussions to obtain a port for the U.S. Navy on the northern coast of Haiti at Mollet-Saint-Nicolas. Bassett was skeptical that this could successfully be negotiated, knowing the fears that the Haitian people felt about their hard-won territorial integrity. Time, however, was not on Bassett and Douglas's side. Just a few weeks later, Navy Admiral Bancroft Girardi arrived with a special note from Secretary of State James Blaine. It seemed that Girardi, rather than Douglas and Bassett, had been given the authority to negotiate for the Mollet. Douglas considered resigning in protest, but as he later wrote,
I consoled myself with the thoughts that I was acting like a good soldier.
Bassett and Douglas set up a meeting with the foreign minister and president of Haiti in late January 1891. But the paranoid Girardi would not allow Douglas to bring Bassett with him. Instead, he brought his young staff lieutenant, fluent in French, to act as interpreter. It left Douglas at a distinct disadvantage. He would later write of the occasion.
I have reason to regret the absence of Mr. Bassett, for it left me at the mercy of men whom I begin to think have intentionally misrepresented me.
During the meeting, Girardi took the lead, pressing hard on the fact that the Haitian president had promised the Mollet during the rebellion after gaining U.S. support. The ham-headed manner in which Girardi was conducting the negotiations not only disturbed the Haitians, but also disturbed Douglas and Bassett. Douglas tried to calm the waters, but the damage of indelicately forcing Haiti's hand was already done. In the end, the Haitians refused to lease the Mollet, and Admiral Girardi returned home. Attacks in the press against Douglas and Bassett increased, with charges that they had failed to deliver on the agreement. As a result of these perceived failures, pressures began to build on Douglas to resign. The Chicago Tribune was among the first to make this call. If all reports from Haiti be correct, there does not seem to be any way out of the present unfortunate complications in which Minister Frederick Douglass has involved American interests in that country, except by his prompt resignation. There is no question in department circles at Washington that Mr. Douglas's administration of our interest has been a failure and that he is incompetent to hold that position. Giving further insult to the abolitionist leader, the paper said that it would be preferable to have a white man as the next minister. Back in New Haven on leave, Bassett read the flurry of newspaper articles coming out on all sides of the debate. A majority of the media were harshly opposed to Douglas returning, saying that he was acting more as a representative of blacks than of the United States. In the face of the growing pressure, Bassett told his friend to remain strong.
I think you owe it to Haiti and to our race to hold right where you are. No other man of our race could fill just the breach that you now fill. You hold the fort. You stand between the handful of our people and the devouring wolves gnashing their teeth in all the panoply of racial hatred to get at them. Don't stir. Don't even move an inch from where you now stand. Don't even whisper about resigning. For the moment you do that, the jig is up for Haiti.
Nonetheless, the elderly Douglas had had enough. By July of 1891, Douglas submitted his resignation.
And I think they just come home, and I think it's a tragedy And I think Bassett, I mean, I can't get into his head, but I think he feels that very keenly. It's definitely, I don't want to say it was a disaster, but I think it was much, much less than a success. And I think he feels it very keenly. And when I read the newspaper accounts, some of them are straightforward racist accounts because these two men are black.
Bassett, who had continued to hope for a future appointment as a diplomat, now saw himself on the outs politically, and he would never again serve the U.S. government in any diplomatic role. Unlike other peers who broke the color barrier in other professional fields, Ebenezer Bassett would be forgotten with the passing of time.
As we come to this anniversary of his appointment, it is important to bring his life and contribution more to the forefront, more to the attention of people, so in order for them to better understand the importance of diplomacy of foreign affairs.
As a character, as an African American, as a diplomat, as someone who was extremely patriotic, he can set a great example.
And yes, he was important, but not only was he the first African American diplomat, he really was somebody that we can revere in terms of leadership, in terms of his emphasis on human rights. So yes, I think he is really very, very relevant. And I, for one, would like to see more people knowledgeable.
Though largely forgotten since his death in 1908, Bassett was a diplomat of consequence. As we approach the 150th anniversary of his appointment in 2019, it is clear that his legacy has had a lasting influence. Bassett's courage, leadership, and integrity inspires a new generation.
Sí, buenas noches. Sí, yo no sé si esto le podrá servir a él, pero me tocó entrar a un programa de inglés en la Brown University en el estado de Rhode Island. Como hablaba de que haces en todo lo que New England incluye Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Haven, en Massachusetts. Y coincidencialmente me tocó vivir en una calle que lleva el nombre de Bassett. Te lo digo por si eso puede servirle. No sé si fue designada en su nombre, pero la calle está ahí, es una calle que está paralela con la Central Avenue, específicamente en Potoque. Bueno, se lo digo porque me tocó vivir ahí por 14 años, compré una casa ahí en esa calle, por si le puede servir de algo. Gracias.
La familia Bassett en Inglaterra era bastante grande y que yo sepa, sí hay una calle nombrada en su honor, pero está en la ciudad de Derby, Connecticut, solamente, su ciudad natal. Desconozco en otra parte. En Potoque. Sí. Que yo sepa, no es en honor de él. Probablemente era, porque hay que recordar también, había de la familia Bassett, y obviamente la familia, los esclavos tomaron su apellido de los dueños en aquel tiempo, de los blancos que fueron dueños de estas personas. Entonces su apellido realmente no es apellido de origen de África. Más probable, me imagino, tiene que ver con una rama de la familia blanca de esa parte de Estados Unidos, pero sí en su estado natal, en Connecticut, ya nombraron una calle en honor de Ebenezer Bassett. De hecho, la universidad donde él estudió, fue el primer afroamericano estudiando ahí, que ahora se llama Central Connecticut State University. Ya han hecho un día de Bassett, ya han hecho un día, una beca bajo el nombre de Bassett, Yale University también, donde estudió. Y realmente, después de publicar el libro, la gente en Connecticut ya está tomando en cuenta mucho más las actividades. Me dio mucho gusto y yo fui a participar el año pasado con las universidades ahí, con una nueva beca en nombre de Bassett. Entonces, y poco a poco estamos tomando ese legado de Bassett y están haciendo muchas más actividades. Es muy bueno, es muy importante, yo creo.
Una pregunta aquí delante.
Gracias, buenas noches, muy buena presentación. Me llama la atención el nivel hipercrítico hacia los comentarios contra Bassett en ese momento y lo que hoy vemos en CNN, en Fox. O sea, es como un 130, 150 años de darle por la cabeza al otro, no importa que sufra, en el periodismo estadounidense. ¿De dónde viene eso?
Bueno, es interesante porque en este tiempo había obviamente intereses comerciales, tanto para lograr la anexación o lograr Samaná en la República Dominicana, tanto en el lado haitiano, ¿no? Entonces era un juego, se puede decir. Después de la guerra civil, entonces se veía Estados Unidos creciendo como poder en la región. Y los intereses comerciales obviamente tenían mucho interés en la isla porque el potencial y el poder económico de la isla. Pero muchos de los comercios en Nueva York, en Boston, querían y había prensa legado a esos intereses comerciales y fueron atacados muy críticamente. Pero también hay que recordar al principio, cuando Bassett se fue como diplomático en la década de 60, 70, ese fue el tiempo de reconstrucción en nuestro país entonces, donde pusieron muchos afroamericanos en puestos del gobierno, puestos de liderazgo, para mostrar y para formar más bien un gobierno más incluyente. Empezando en la década de 90, y el principio del siglo XX es donde empezamos a ver ahora lo que llamamos Jim Crow, de segregación y sentimiento más, algo más duro racialmente, ¿no? Y entonces quizás la crítica en la segunda etapa, donde fue con Douglas, era más dura para comparar con antes, por ese cambio de la actitud, cambio de mentalidad un poco y la situación política. Y entonces es algo que se notaba en ese tiempo.
¿Alguna otra pregunta?
Gracias a ustedes.
Permítanme invitarles a las próximas actividades de la Academia. Este sábado 10 tendremos en la sede de la Universidad Católica Tecnológica de Barahona, UCATEBA, el Seminario de Historia Local, Economía y Sociedad en la Región Suroeste, siglos XVII-XX. Habrá un autobús disponible con capacidad para 45 personas para los residentes aquí en la capital que deseen asistir. Para reservar su cupo solamente tienen que anotarse aquí en las oficinas de la Academia y tiene un costo de 500 pesos que cubre el pago de transportes, refrigerios y almuerzo. El viaje a Barahona el próximo sábado. El miércoles 14 tenemos la conferencia La Historia Dominicana vista desde la diáspora, a cargo del doctor Edward Paulino, que es profesor asistente del Departamento de Historia del John Jay College de la Universidad de la Ciudad de Nueva York, becario del programa Fulbright. Y el miércoles 21, la conferencia Juan Pablo Duarte en Informes Secretos, por el mayor general doctor Rafael Pérez y Pérez, miembro correspondiente de la Academia. Al agradecer a todos, el personal de la Embajada de los Estados Unidos que nos acompaña, Les invitamos, como de costumbre, al brindis que tenemos preparado siempre al final de estas actividades. Buenas noches y muchas gracias.